Midwest Whitetail is brought to you by Hoyt Archery, Fuse Accessories, Realtree, Muddy Outdoors, Cabela's, Rocket Broadheads, Scott Archery, Frigid Forage, Trophy Rock, Easton Arrows, RTP Outdoors, Non-Typical Wildlife Solutions, Ozonics, Wilderness Athlete, Grizzly Coolers, Redneck Hunting Blinds, and Nikon.
On this week's episode of Midwest Whitetail, I've got John Dudley with me. And over the years, I've offered a lot of shooting tips on the shows, especially during the off season. And a lot of these tips I get from guys like John. I don't pretend to be a top-notch archer, but I do apply the tips that these guys offer. So having John here, I think, is a great opportunity for us to pick his brain on some of the stuff that he does that makes him a better bow hunter. And we're primarily bow hunters, but we'll talk a little bit of just general archery too. So the first thing I'm going to do is throw it to John, and he's going to tell us what the most common tip is that he sees from bow hunters. What is the one thing that they could do better that would make them more consistent, maybe to help them shoot a little bit better at longer distances? So it's all John, so take it away.
Well, I mean, one, thanks for having me. Two, I think one of the most common mistakes that a lot of bow hunters make is really not understanding what facial pressure actually does for arrows. And as you know, I'm sure, with a compound bow at full draw, especially when you have let off with a bow, there's not a lot of string tension when the bow is at full draw. And then as it gets through the easy part of holding the bow, the string doesn't have a lot of tension on it. So any type of pressure that we're putting with our face on that bowstring is immediately going to dictate the path of that arrow or the arrow flight. And then as hunters, as soon as we put a broadhead on, obviously we're going to greatly magnify how that arrow is going to be affected. And it's difficult enough to get fixed blades and field points to fly together as it is, and then when you start changing in small little things like either your form, which we can talk about today, a face mask, or facial hair, which is getting more and more popular right now.
You're only saying that because you've got some, and
well,
I don't.
It took me 3 years to grow this out. But all that immediately has an impact on what the arrow does. So really what I like to do is, one, I like to teach people to learn to anchor properly so that the string and, more importantly, the arrow shaft sits at a portion of their face where they sit within what I call the safe zone. So essentially your face protrudes at 2 points, the lips and the chin, and then obviously your facial hair will be below that. So I really like to coach technique that allows the arrow shaft and the knock of the arrow, and preferably not the fletching, but with some people it may be, especially if you have too long of a draw, that'll come further back. But I like this to sit in the safe zone, which is more or less the concave or the cradle part of the face. So I really like to coach form to where the arrow is sitting right above the chin and not on the chin line, because when it's on the chin, if you turn your head, you're immediately turning the arrow. So a lot of people that go into an archery shop and the archery shop tells them that their bow's tuned perfectly, shoots it through paper, they've got a perfect paper tear, but then they go home and can't duplicate that. A lot of times it's just a matter of them anchoring differently or turning their face differently on the arrow, and it immediately affects it. So depending on the style of release that you're shooting, which right now I've got a wrist strap release on. I know Bill really likes wrist strap releases. And with this type of release, what I like to coach is putting the knuckle of my index finger right at the base of the earlobe. And that really allows me to get my finger around the trigger. And then it also, when you see this triangle, it's going to put this release, or the arrow, in the safe part of my face. Now, if you anchor slightly differently, which, a lot of bow hunters, because they've really never been taught proper anchor position, I think just for kind of the locking it in mentality, people go thumb behind the neck or thumb low on the neck. And what happens is, when you do that, if you draw back, and you go thumb behind the neck, you can see the arrow shaft is immediately contacting. And on the shorter bows, a lot of people will have to go further forward to the string, and they'll have to have their peep higher in the string as well. You know, this for me is going to immediately cause a different type of arrow flight. But if I focus on putting the knuckle of my index finger at the base of that earlobe, right at the back of the jaw, you can see that my triangle has come higher on my face, and now the fletching and more or less the string is completely clear of my face. So my arrow flight is perfect. And being a former competitive archer, a lot of this stuff didn't really add up until I had to start shooting at longer distances, and you really start to put a big magnifying glass on, well, why is that arrow there? You know, I knew I was in the middle when I shot, and then you just start to see your groups vary, and you start to focus more on form that allows perfectly clean arrow flight, and then all of a sudden the grouping just sucks together. And for those who do want to extend their range, arrow flight and consistency on their anchor point and facial pressure is going to immediately help that out. And I guess one last thing is, you saw my position with a handheld release. If you do put your index knuckle right at the base of that earlobe, like this, tip of my nose to the string, I've got really good clearance, even if I shot a face mask. But then if I took this release and switched to a handheld release, which with a handheld release, when you hold it, you actually just take your index finger right underneath your jawline, the middle finger's right above, and even though this is a totally different release, you can find that if I draw back and I anchor this way, I'm in the same peep position, same clearance on my face, and I can guarantee that I'm going to have better arrow flight. And especially as a bow hunter, I know that I'm going to make good shots with bulkier clothes, face mask, or with a broadhead.
Okay, yeah, that's a good tip. I appreciate that. And go ahead and shoot one. And while we're getting that arrow, we're going to move on to the next segment of the show, and we're going to come back again and talk some more shooting. But Ted Miller has sent us in a segment where he goes into a lot of detail about horizontal rubs. And we started talking about this last year a little bit on the shows. And it's just a really cool way to get trail camera pictures, trail camera video, and just kind of amp up the bucks in your area. So Ted's going to give us some tips on horizontal rubs. John's going to take a shot, and then we're going to go down and grab his arrow.
Well, just a little follow-up on the horizontal rub. I did a podcast there with Aaron early there last fall on doing these kind of as a signpost and how I'd been hunting over them the last several years. This rub here has actually been set up for 3 or 4 years. I had a real big buck on here last year on this rub. He ended up dying in a fight with another buck, so found him dead. And there was another real aggressive buck on there last year too that actually tore this rub down. I didn't have it fastened good enough. It's pretty important to use heavy wire and get them fastened so the bucks don't tear them down. They can be real aggressive on these rubs occasionally. I think it's real important to use a Scotch pine limb. I think they just like that better than a cedar or another type of pine, but then I try to make it loose so they can knock it around, feel like they're tearing things up or whatever. But as you can see, this one's been worked a lot, and it's real. The bark was real sappy and smelled like pine there earlier. And another important thing I think is to make a scrape in conjunction with the rub. I mean, here I've worked up a little dirt and then just kind of used the natural limb for a licking branch. And on a lot of the setups, I'll just, I try to get a licking branch to hang over the end of the rub that sticks out here, just so they'll have the opportunity to work a licking branch in the scrape and the rub, whatever they want to do. This one's kind of set up on a ridge that leads to a crop field up here, so it's You know, it could be called a staging area or just kind of a travel corridor on this ridge. So I try to set them up, you know, where I know bucks are gonna be traveling, I guess, is the main thing. And I've set one up on a food plot down here, and I had a lot of activity on it too. So it's pretty interesting. Actually, on this rub, you get several different mature bucks work this rub during the fall, and actually a couple of them had worked it the year before too, so that's pretty cool. I shot a nice 10-pointer there this fall, and he was on another rub, but hadn't seen him all year, and he showed up on that rub about the 1st of November, and that's the same time that he showed up on it the year before. So pretty interesting that they do the same thing from year to year. Some bucks will work it real aggressively. Some bucks, you know, are real timid when they come in to work it. You know, I think it just depends on the personality of the buck, I guess, more than anything. It's kind of interesting to see how they progress through the fall. I mean, they'll start out real aggressive there latter part of October, and then as it gets, you know, into November, and you know, the bucks will be looking for does and pretty much walk right by one and not even pay any attention to it. But then later on, you know, they just kind of seems like they lose their aggression and will less aggressively work them, I guess. But then on this rub here, the latter part of November, there's a big 10-pointer on here working this, and he was just standing there almost like he was going to go to sleep when he was working it. He was definitely wore out from the rut, I guess, but had the intentions, but he just didn't have the ambition to work it, I guess, or whatever. But main thing they are is just a signpost rub where you want it to be. I mean, that in this area there's not a lot of ideal rubbing posts or trees or whatever, so I'm just making one where I want the buck to use it, and then it just attracts his attention, you know, away from you while you're in the tree stand, and gives a perfect place to put up a trail camera and get something besides just a buck walking down a trail. Tweak them a little bit year to year. I found it doesn't really make a lot of difference on the position of the rub, you know, or what it looks like, just as long as it's, you know, about knee level and can hang out there in about any position that you want it to. But main thing, just kind of get them so they'll knock them around. But they work. I mean, I've had does and little bucks and big bucks and everything work the same rub, so definitely not a one buck thing. So any buck that walks by here, you know, and then if he doesn't want to work the rub, I mean, he has opportunity to work a scrape and licking branch there too. So I'll keep putting them out, and hopefully the bucks will keep hitting them. But they worked good this year.
Okay, so before I let you out of here, you've got to watch me shoot and tell me what I'm doing wrong.
You totally set yourself up for that.
I'm going to take a couple shots, and I haven't warmed up at all, so this is going to be first arrow accuracy.
Well,
this is me in the tree, right?
Yeah,
okay.
There's
so
no excuses here.
Do I have to pick it? Do I tell you which spot I'm shooting at first, or can I just shoot and then tell you?
Well, G5 buck, you just shoot and then tell us.
On a lot of my shots, I just shoot and then tell them later. Well, oh, that's where I was aiming.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, top right.
Yeah, and see, that's really good. If you want to come around here, if you make another shot, I actually want to point this out. Come straight behind Bill here, and this is something as a coach that I would definitely look for in a student. So this is.
So I'm going to just draw it?
Yeah, just shoot your normal way. Don't do anything different because we're here. But actually right here, you can see exactly what I talked about. There's very good clearance throughout his chin. The arrow shaft isn't riding the face. He barely has his string right here. He's got it at the side of his nose, which he's probably grown accustomed to over years of shooting. You're good to shoot too, Bill, whenever. But yeah, very good clearance all throughout here. It's going to do good for arrow flight, obviously good for group. The only thing I would say, and this goes for everybody at home, really be sure to tie your peep sights in just for safety purposes. This is actually a practice that's mandatory in international shooting, is to actually make sure your peep is tied in and it's tied around there, mainly because there's been archers that have lost their eye. If you ever shoot your bow without an arrow in there by accident, or if someone pulls your bow that's never held one before and they accidentally let go, that is a projectile. So just for the safety of everybody, that would be really critical. But looks super good, Bill. We need to go to a distance that you're not capable of shooting, so I've got a chance.
Well, if we go about 5 yards back, we're gonna be stretching my...
That looks solid. Whenever you can shoot and you've got one single shadow on the target, either you made one good shot and one horrid one, or you're doing exactly what you need to do.
Well, we're gonna back John up. He was saying something about 100 yards. So I don't know if y'all have seen somebody shoot 100 yards before. I've tried it, and I don't do it a lot on purpose because I don't have an unlimited supply of arrows. But apparently, when John was younger, he had a lot of arrows because he's gotten good enough at 100 yards that he's gonna trust it. I'm gonna go grab my rangefinder. We're gonna go down the driveway, over the hill, through the vale, and we're gonna find 100. And John's gonna
We'll go to
toss.
the new grill.
Yeah, we need to put some stakes on there anyway.
Cook steaks, and then we'll shoot from the grill.
That looked really good too. I think that one dropped in. I'm not gonna let you shoot an apple off my head at 100 yards, but I think those were pretty good.
I wouldn't try it. Not with a friend.
We know a few people who you can try it with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good group there.
Yeah, it's
I mean, I'd
few
take
little
that.
tweaks. Just shows you, at this distance, difference of a little bit of wind, a little bit of, different rangefinder. We both brought bows, so this was the time for us, really, both of what we're good at to come together. So
Yeah, it's
I was
awesome.
super appreciative too.
No, and thank you. So that's going to wrap up this week's episode. And as we always say during the off season, we don't really know what's coming next week. So we'll just keep bringing you this kind of stuff. I mean, as much as we can, we'll make it fast-paced and fun, and having something to do with whitetail hunting. Well, thanks for joining us. We'll see you right back here again next week for the next episode of Midwest Whitetail. And remember to always dream big.
See you guys.